June 8th, 2021 City Council meeting of the City of McMinnville to order this evening, and I will call on Claudia to do a roll call. Claudia?
Councillor Garvin. Councillor Geary. Councillor Minky.
Here.
Councillor Chenoweth.
Present.
Councillor Peralta. Council President Drapkin.
Here.
Mayor Hill.
Here, and show that Councillor Geary is with us.
Hello, sorry about that.
And then Councillor Garvin just joined us. Okay, let's go ahead and we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance, and I would like to lead that this evening, if I may. I pledge allegiance to United States of America,
and
which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. This evening, we have two proclamations. And so the first is going to be a Park and Recreation Month proclamation and summer fun. And so I'm going to call on Katie Nord to present the summer fun program. And after she has presented, I will go ahead and read the designation of July as Park and Recreation Month. Katie, welcome.
hi. Let me get situated really quick. Sorry. Thank you, Mayor and members of City Council. My name is Katie Noyd with McMinnville Parks and Recreation, and Sam Geary from the library is on the call as well. Thanks for recognizing Parks and Recreation Month for July in a little bit. And this year we are expanding and collaborating with the library department to bring summer fun to the community. I'm going to give a quick overview of our plan for summer fun. With guidance from Susan Muir and Jenny Berg, the directors of Parks and Recreation and the library, we discussed how we would bring free and fun activities to the community of McMinnville. Our plan is to provide residents with fun and healthy opportunities to connect, since we've missed out on that a lot this past year, to learn and to stay active. Our guiding principles include inclusivity, being creative and mobile, reaching those who are furthest from opportunity, and optimization of city capacity. One way we are reaching out to the community is going to 2 new bookmobile locations, and we'll be taking books, outdoor games, and learning kits to those neighborhoods, as well as utilizing more of our parks to take recreation to where the people gather already. This past year has taught us a lot about staying flexible and rolling with what comes at us. Our team has developed a summer fun passport. It's going to be in English and Spanish, and it details all of the fun and free activities from June 28th through August 28th. Families can pick up a passport after June 17th from the Aquatic Center, Community Center, or Library, or they can stop by our Farmers Market booth on June 17th and the 24th. The passport details all of the activities, and then certain activities can earn you a stamp. If you get 6 stamps, 6 events stamped, and you turn in your page, then you're eligible to win a grand prize. Our website is listed on the slide, and it details all of the information, and we will have updates as well. Everybody knows that COVID has changed things drastically up and down, so we are kind of waiting on what those rules are going to be, but we're hopefully going to have a really great summer. Our activities are divided into categories with icons in the passport as well as on the website. Some of the activities kind of fit in multiple categories, so I'll try to talk about them in their main activity or main category. Active living includes wellness walks on Monday, move it outdoors, fitness classes on Thursday, bike rides on Saturdays, and some of our summer fun Saturdays, which will include things like game days, pickleball clinics, and water wiffle ball. These activities encourage people to explore our parks and to get outside this summer. The next category is especially for kids. We know that families are always looking for things to keep their kiddos occupied in the summer, so we're expanding our fun for kids. This includes book buddies, story time, Friday fun days, and more. We also know that everyone deserves to have fun, so we have an all ages category that includes art in the park, library reading challenge, zucchini races, team game nights, laser tag in the park, that's for adults as well, and summer fun Saturdays that include dog days of summer and remote control fun. Another summer-long series will be our Wednesdays at Wortman activities that include musical performances by a lot of diverse groups, including Takahashi, Paradise of Samoa, as well as a comedic magician and a mad science program. We're very excited about bringing those performances to the community. Last but not least, we have our bigger community events for movies and music. This summer, we will be bringing back the summer concert series to City Park for 3 concerts in July. And as I said on the last slide, there will be a lot of daytime musical performances at the Wednesday at Wortman events. We are also going to be having some movies in the park on 5 Friday nights in July and August. We will be showing family-friendly movies, doing some pre-show activities, and having a lot of fun at Joe Dancer Park. We would not be able to do all these activities without the support of the city and all the city staff, as well as our sponsors and community partners. All of these businesses and organizations have a hand in bringing summer fun to McMinnville, and we greatly appreciate the support. We hope that everyone joins us this summer as we provide these free, fun, and safe activities for everyone. Thank you for allowing me to present tonight, and let me know if you have any questions.
Any questions for Katie or Susan? Seeing none, let me go ahead and read our proclamation this evening. Designation of July as Park and Recreation Month. Whereas McMinnville's parks and recreation programs enhance and improve the social, economic, and environmental fabric of our community. And whereas our parks and recreation programs are important to making McMinnville a cool place to live. And whereas the park and recreation programs make people want to live here. And whereas the park and recreations areas help the environment and give us fresh air to breathe, and whereas the park and natural recreation areas make for fun places for kids and adults to go outside and to play, and whereas the city of McMinnville recognizes the benefits of awesome park and revenue resources, now therefore I, Scott A. Hill, Mayor of McMinnville, do hereby extend the spirit of fun to the residents of McMinnville in recognizing the month of July as National Park and Recreation Month. In witness thereof, I have hereto set my hand, this the 23rd day of June in the year 2021. So let's back up and say that it's going to be set, my hand is set on this, the 8th day of June in the year 2021. Signed, Scott A. Hill, Mayor of McMinnville. Again, Park and Recreation and Samantha and the library, thank you so very much for all that you're doing to make our park and recreation one of our highlights of the city of McMinnville. Thank you all. The next proclamation this evening is going to be the designation of June as LGBTQIA+ Pride Month. Whereas the fight for equality continues for lesbians, gays, bisexuals, transgender, and queer and questioning LGBTQIA+ and other historically margined members of our community, and the responsibility falls on each of us to form a new equitable and inclusive society. And whereas the city of McMinnville pledges to honor, exhibit, and otherwise live to our core values of stewardship, accountability, courage, and equity. And whereas June 28, 2021 marks the 52nd anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising, 6 days of demonstrations led by Martha P. Johnson, a Black transgender woman, sparked by the targeting and arrest by police of lesbian, gay, and transgender bar patrons in violation of their civil rights, an event widely recognized as the beginning of the modern day gay rights movement. And whereas on the 2nd of June 2020, President Bill Clinton declared June to be Gay and Lesbian Pride Month to commemorate the June 28th, 1969 Stonewall Uprising. And on June 1st, 2009, President Barack Obama expanded the commemoration by declaring June to be Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Pride Month. And whereas the city of McMinnville stands with the LGBTQIA plus community in struggles to ensure equal treatment for all and to defend and advocate for LGBTQIA plus humans, the rights as human rights. And whereas despite this extraordinary and inspiring progress, the LGBTQIA plus Americans continue to face discrimination simply for being who they are. And whereas the city of McMinnville commits to advocate for full protection for all LGBTQIA plus individuals to make our city a place where all people, regardless of their sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression, are treated with dignity and respect. Now, therefore, I, Scotty Hill, Mayor of McMinnville, do hereby proclaim the month of June as LGBTQIA plus Pride Month. In witness thereof, I have herefore set my hand on this, the 8th day of June in the year 2021. Signed, Scotty Hill, Mayor of McMinnville. Okay, let's move now to comments from citizens. Anyone that would like to address the council and provide comments on to the council, feel free to let yourself be known to Claudia. Anyone may speak on any topic other than a matter in litigation, quasi-judicial land use matter, or a matter scheduled for public hearing at some future date. And so we have 3 minutes per person to address the council. If you wish to speak, again, please raise your hand in the Zoom function and Claudia will recognize you. If you've not filled out a form, please state your name, unmute your mic, state your name, and you'll have an opportunity to speak to the council. I will start out this evening that we have received, each of the councilors have received a numerous statements that is on a particular topic this evening, and I will just make mention of that right now. We've received, it looks to be 7 pieces of information. So Claudia, do we have anyone that would like to address the council this evening?
No, Mayor, we have no one signed up for public comment. I do want to state for the record that Councilor Peralta has also joined the meeting.
Thank you. Okay. With no comments, again, the emails that have been received are into the record this evening. We're going to start this evening with a presentation, infrastructure-based time extension request, the IBTER House Bill 2001 presentation. So we'll call on Planning Director Heather Richards to present. Heather?
Yes, good evening, Mayor and City Councilors. I'm going to introduce this, and then Shad Roundy, who is with Jacobs Engineering, will be providing you a presentation. What we wanted to do is bring to you the conclusions of our analysis we did for an Iptur evaluation. Iptur is a term that's come out of House Bill 2001. If you remember, House Bill 2001 is a bill that allows for or mandates that cities allow for missing middle housing in all zones that allow single family dwelling units. And the missing middle housing goes up to 4plexes. And it's to allow it on every single lot as applicable. So part of the House bill was giving the cities opportunities to analyze their infrastructure systems to see if that type of allowance in our single family dwelling unit zones would do anything to the infrastructure systems where we could not serve that type of increased density. And it is called an infrastructure-based time extension request. It's written into the bill that cities of our size, over 25,000, McMinnville is a community of 34,500 people, that if we want to submit an application to the state to say we do have some areas where we have concerns about infrastructure and we need to have some time to put the infrastructure in the ground to support that type of development in those areas, we need to submit that application by June 30 of 2021. So we did do an analysis. We did this analysis with a grant from the Department of Land Conservation and Development and hired a consultant to help us walk through it to analyze our water, sewer, and transportation utilities in terms of supporting this type of development. The bill also allowed the city to analyze stormwater. We don't have a stormwater utility at this point in time, but we did have discussions about how the stormwater system impacts our wastewater system. It's written into the rules how to analyze this. So as we get these mandates from the state, we get the sandboxes in which we are working, and sometimes they are smaller rather than bigger. And this one is particularly small in terms of the parameters under which we were working to do our analysis. So the rules told us that we had to do an analysis anticipating missing middle housing development to December of 2023, December 31, 2023. And the way we would anticipate the development is anything above our baseline, so what we already expect to develop in this regard. So if there is land that is currently what I would call greenfield development, so undeveloped or underdeveloped land where the lot sizes are greater than 1/2 acre and currently have 2 or less dwelling units on them, we would then assume a 3% increase in the number of dwelling units assumed for that land. For land that's considered infill and redevelopment, that'd be 1/2 acre or less with 1 single family dwelling unit, we would assume a 1% increase in dwelling units on that land. And so it's a 1%, 3% increase until December 31, 2023. So very, very small, narrow analysis in which we were working. The bill also told us how to describe what a deficiency is. So what it means is that we cannot provide what we consider acceptable services for water, wastewater, and transportation, and it also describes what is the threshold for acceptable. To give you an example for a utility that most of us understand, for transportation, it's a safety threshold. So what we would have to analyze and defend is that the 1% and 3% increase in the next 2 years of this missing middle housing development would create unsafe conditions, and we would do that with crash data. Excuse me. So we went through the analysis throughout the whole city, and Shad's going to share with you the results of that. I apologize. We're not recommending an application for infrastructure extension request, but we did want to share with you what the outcome of the analysis was, because it will sort of lay the foundation for upcoming master plan updates that we're going to be doing. So with that, I'll turn it over to Shad.
Welcome, Shad.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Hill and City Council members. I'm going to share my screen, so give me just a minute to do that. Can everybody see the presentation? Yes? People are able to see?
Yes, Chad, we see it in the presenter view. So the primary slide and the following slide.
Yeah, let me see if I can change that. How's that?
Here we go. That looks good.
Okay. So as Heather explained, we evaluated a couple of different things, and we looked at a number of different utilities and infrastructure. The first part of this presentation is going to focus primarily on sanitary sewer because it was the most limited in terms of capacity for near-term development and for the application of this housing bill. So what you see on this map are some areas of the system or the city where additional known development may occur. The orange, blue, and red areas, these are 1,600 dwelling units that were identified by the planning department as either in development or planned development by 2023. So as you can see, 1,600 units primarily on the west side of the city. The other things that we considered, as Heather mentioned, were up to a 3% single family additional developed and underdeveloped areas. So these areas that she mentioned as greenfield or new development potentially could see densities at 3% greater than what you typically might see for those zoning classifications. And then as infill, which are areas that are not shown on this, but areas that have already developed, the housing bill allows for up to a 1% increase by 2023 of kind of that infill development where maybe someone puts a unit behind their home or subdivides. Some of this is going to look a little bit technical, but I did want to mention for the sanitary sewer, we'll show you the results of kind of your existing system capacity, so where the limitations are in the existing system, and then what the capacity looks like when we add the 1,600 units of new development, and then what it looks like when we then apply the 3 and the 1% associated with the housing bill. The city already has an aggressive program for reducing wet weather flows. So in a sanitary system, the biggest risk occurs when there's rainfall, and the city tries to prevent any kind of potential overflow that could occur for a storm that has a frequency of 5 years. So that's essentially a standard set by Oregon DEQ, where you want to try to prevent an overflow for any kind of event that would occur once every 5 years or less. And so the city's main program right now is to improve the system to prevent that stormwater from actually coming into the sanitary sewer. Again, these are preliminary results. And as Heather mentioned, you'll have an upcoming collection system or sanitary sewer master plan where many of these results will be updated with current information and flow monitoring data and so forth in your system. So this is anything you see in red here. Blue are the main pipelines in your system throughout the city. Anything that says P means it's a pump station. If it shows up as red, that essentially means that it's nearing capacity or at capacity during that large storm event. So when we look at your system without adding development, there are a few areas that are already stressed, meaning that they're nearing capacity. When we add the 1,600 units, there are a few additional pipelines that show up as being near capacity or at capacity. That equates to approximately 1,800 feet of pipeline. And then when we add in the housing bill element of this, it stresses the system a little bit. but it's not enough that we see a major difference from kind of this base case where you're adding new or planned development. So as a result of this analysis, we did not conclude that a deferment could be applied for based on this rule alone. What we did talk with the city staff about is really the need to move forward with the master planning effort in this coming year to look at some of this infrastructure that's nearing capacity. And in addition to what might develop by 2023, consider other development and areas where the UGB has recently expanded to come up with capacity improvement projects or additional wet weather reduction projects to implement over the next 20-year planning horizon. This is just a summary of the sewer analysis. So again, we looked at a baseline where there's about 10,000 feet of pipe near capacity, adding the 1,600 units, that increases by about 2,000 feet. And then adding additional 100 units, which is the combination of the 1% and 3%, which does not dramatically impact the system. So in addition to sanitary sewer, we also reviewed the water distribution system. The water distribution system for a major portion of the city is in what's called pressure zone 1, and that zone has a lot of capacity for growth. So that was not impacted by this Housing Bill 2001. Pressure zone 2 is kind of in the higher elevations, and McMinnville Water and Light needs to implement to serve anybody that might come into pressure zone 2, a booster station, and eventually a reservoir. So any improvement to serve additional units or density in pressure zone 2 would be taken into account when they build that infrastructure, which can be planned for. The transportation system, again, we didn't see a major impact as a result of the Housing Bill 2001. And similar to your sanitary system, the transportation system plan will be updated in this coming fiscal year. And then finally, for stormwater, knowing you don't have a stormwater utility, we still looked at some of the impacts for stormwater associated with areas where we also saw a lot of rainfall impacting the sanitary sewer. The conclusions were very similar for stormwater. And as noted here, you will also have a stormwater master plan update in approximately the 2 fiscal years, so 2022 to 2023, where a stormwater fund may be considered for stormwater improvements. So our recommendations were to not apply for the deferral. There just was not a large enough impact, but certainly to move forward with your master planning efforts for the health and the capacity of your long-term infrastructure, and to accommodate any near and long-term development that will happen in the city. Those are the slides that I have. I'm happy to answer any questions that people may have.
So let's go ahead and open it up for questions of Shad or Heather on the recommendations. And if we can go ahead and take this slide down so we can see everyone, that might be more helpful to see everyone.
Yep, I will end sharing.
There we go. So any questions on this presentation this evening? Go ahead, Kelly. You're on mute.
So how does this affect our budget plans for the next year to 2 years? I mean, were these master plans envisioned for the next couple of years to 2003?
Yeah, so if you recall, we have a very aggressive update for our facility master plan so that we can bring some of that UGB land on board for development. We have budgeted and planned for updating the transportation system, starting the update. Most of these updates will take 2 years. Starting the transportation system plan, the wastewater treatment facility, and the wastewater conveyance master plan next year, this next fiscal year, will go out for procurement on the transportation system plan here this summer, and then engineering wastewater leading the wastewater plans, and they want to wait until the new mic is installed to start that effort. And then the following fiscal year, we will start the effort to update the stormwater master plan. So they're all budgeted for already in the budget that's before you tonight, actually.
And then I think in our presentation by Mack Water and Light, we saw the projections of what the cost might be for Zone 2 in the future for those 300 to 400 homes up in the West Hills. But I truly appreciated being able to look on the map to see where we are close to capacity and how that's kind of spread out. I saw over kind of in the northeast part, there seemed to be a real problem there, but I'm guessing that's because of the old system, and then we've had other things flowing into that. So go ahead, Kelly.
Actually, I think Cherry's next, but I do have a question after Cherry.
Okay. Well, I think this is opened up just for counselors, and it's a presentation tonight. It's not a part of the budget presentation. So I'll keep it just to counselors in this presentation. So Kelly.
All right. Voice here. I don't know why they always go off at the same time. Okay, so I'm trying to understand. So you're basically saying, yeah, this phase 2 thing has to happen, but the reservoir and stuff, it's going to be 8 to 10 million. I just don't see that happening until we're building out all the way down there into the new urban growth boundary.
Well, so the Zone 2, and I don't want to speak for Mack Water and Light, but the building the infrastructure for Zone 2, for the water for Zone 2 is already in their water master plan. They as like the city are scheduled to update their water master plan to accommodate the new UGB amendment that we just went through. And so they'll be looking at how to serve the rest of the city, the rest of the land in the city as well. But the Zone 2 is in their master plan. I think at this point in time, it's a matter of timing relative to financing it. The 300 units is what's approved and on the books right now. So we approved the subdivision for that back in early 2000. But there is other land in the city's UGB that is in Zone 2. If you recall, up at the Fox Ridge Road area, that's also in Zone 2. We did not bring any, we brought very limited land, like only a corner piece into the newest UGB amendment from Zone 2.
And then Kelly, if you remember, I think it was the last council meeting, I talked a little bit in my update from Mack Water and Light that Howard Astor and a few others came to us because they had these 12 homes that they're looking at building out, and we're in negotiating with them. Again, our biggest concern is if you peel off more and more of the houses, then when we have to build the big system, we can't spread it out. And so we're working with Howard right now in what it might look like if they make a commitment and we put a covenant on those properties that they would participate in the total build out when we do that, taking them off of their individual pumping stations and using the gravity fed system at a later date, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. When I had talked to Astor earlier, my impression was they definitely were going to be building out the portion of the streets that you saw tonight in the colored areas. They were definitely, that was already going to come from the reservoir that was there. And that's not what I heard tonight.
Well, I think so. I think John might have misunderstood your question. If you recall, the map he provided, it had a blue line on it. The blue line demarcated what was zone 2 and zone 1. So in the coloration of the different phases that are next for Howard's development, 2 of them, the pink and the yellow, have the majority of those lots are in zone 1.
Okay,
There's
well, that's what I
a
thought.
small sample that's in zone 2, and I think that's what the mayor is referencing. But for this Iptur analysis, we did not include zone 2. So we only included what we thought would develop between now and December 31, 2023. We didn't see that infrastructure in the ground and that development occurring in zone 2 in the next 2 years.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And when we did the analysis, we pushed pretty hard on it. So I wanted to make sure that everyone understood, and I didn't see this in the paper tomorrow, that we are not anticipating 1,600 new homes built over the next 2 years. That's just what could happen because that's what's entitled right now, but that's not what would happen with our development program. But we wanted to make sure that we were taking the worst case scenario in terms of the highest amount of development in this testing analysis to make sure that we were ensuring the city was not in a risk position in terms of infrastructure support for development over the next 2 years with House Bill 2001.
Okay, so I just want to kind of paraphrase back to you. The property we're showing in pink and yellow, and I guess the purple up above, that's in zone 1?
No, so after I'll ask John to send me that map and I can send that to you afterwards. Portions of it are in zone 1 and portions
Yeah, I know
of it are
where
in
the
zone
blue
2.
line flows.
Yeah.
But you see, I get questions about this all the time, and so I want to be correct in what I tell you.
It's very confusing, and it's an ongoing conversation with Mack, Water and Light and Howard Astor in terms of how those properties will develop. They're above the line. We call it above the line because it's an elevation issue. In terms
Yeah, I really appreciated the map tonight, but if you've got a better one, I'd love it.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then Heather, from my perspective, when it comes to wastewater, and Mike's on the line too, we have a capital fund for wastewater, correct? That is fairly healthy, that allows us, once we get the wastewater plan where we need to, that it doesn't come out of the general budget per se because we have the capital plan, but it's a stormwater that we don't have a capital plan for that. We'd have to come up with a fee base to grow that plan. Is that correct, Mike?
That's correct, Mayor. Currently, you do have a wastewater capital fund, Fund 77, in your budget that is primarily used to fund large capital projects in the wastewater system, and it's 100% ratepayer funded at this point. So there's no debt in the wastewater fund, either in operations and maintenance or in capital. And this council and its predecessors have worked very hard to make sure that there's a ongoing reserve in that fund to be able to address future capital needs. So as you update your master plans, a new list of projects will come out of that. And you've done a good job putting money away to be able to afford those first round of projects that'll be included in that update without having to take on debt. So that's a success story for this council and the prior councils. Stormwater is another story. There is no funding for stormwater maintenance or capacity currently. The pipes that are in the roadway, we're able to use street funds to maintain because they immediately affect and drain the street system. But there are a number of pipes in the system that will need upgrading, and you'll need to address that via likely a stormwater utility that would then allow you to do ongoing operations and maintenance as well as capacity improvements. There are some pending regulations that the city will have to comply with related to total maximum daily loads on the Yamhill and the Willamette, particularly related to mercury. And so over the next few months, we'll be soliciting for a consulting firm that can help us put together a implementation plan to address those new requirements. And out of that will become the foundation for a stormwater utility.
And then on top of the mercury that I think you updated us 2 weeks ago on, Mike, temperature coming out of wastewater and sewer are going to be increasingly scrutinized at a later date that could add additional cost. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. And in our current wastewater plan, we anticipate the need to address temperature. And the city currently owns all of the property between the treatment plant and the river. And there's room there to perhaps build some treatment wetlands that would cool the water before it's discharged. And there are other options that could be implemented. Rather than discharge effluent to the river, you could build a reuse system and reuse that water in an appropriate manner, with either in industry or in irrigation on farmland or perhaps parkland. And so there will be a number of options that will be on the table when it's time to address temperature. The driver for that will be when they adopt new total maximum daily loading, TMDLs, for the Yamhills Basin. And that's on DEQ's to-do list, but we don't have a good indication when those new TMDLs will be developed for the Yamhill.
And so what you're talking about is the kind of the blue line water for reuse for agriculture or whatever it may be.
Yep,
is that
absolutely. Correct? It's actually purple pipe, but you're absolutely on track what you were thinking of.
Okay, good. Other questions for Heather, Shad, or Mike? Go ahead, Sal.
Thank you, Mayor. This is for Mike. I'm unfamiliar with stormwater utility. Is that a taxing district for funding stormwater maintenance?
It would be a fee-driven utility, much like your wastewater or your water or your power bill. Those are all fee-driven, and there are a number of ways that can be implemented. So as part of the development of the stormwater program, that consultant will be able to bring forward to the public and to the council for consideration a number of options on how a stormwater utility could be funded or founded. It could be based on impervious area. There are a number of different methodologies that can be used that help set a fee structure for funding a utility. For the entire time I've been here, we've been talking about stormwater and the pending regulations that will drive us to having a more formal program. And I don't want to read about it in the paper tomorrow either, but stormwater tax is essentially what it is. The water that's falling on the ground, we have to figure out how to treat and convey. And currently, we don't have any system in place to facilitate the operations, maintenance, and capacity of that stormwater that hits the ground.
Thank you, Mike. I have a couple of other questions about this idea. The stormwater utility, essentially, you're talking about creating a funding mechanism or potentially a funding mechanism to address the costs associated with mitigating the impact of stormwater on our streams and our pipes. Is that basically about it? And then if that's the case, then does the money can be spent for both infrastructure and for mitigate, like habitat mitigation. You were talking about stuff to cool down the water before it gets into the rivers and stuff. Is that basically about right?
That's absolutely correct, Sal. And a robust stormwater program will have several elements, including public outreach, as well as environmental improvement as well. So, and that will apply both to stormwater and to wastewater. One of the options for addressing wastewater effluent temperature is to rebuild watershed environments such that they're doing a better job of shading the rivers and streams. And so that will apply across both the stormwater and the wastewater programs, Sal. It's a great point.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate the context.
Remy?
Thank you. And I just need to remember my question for Mike, which was, well, that's embarrassing. I'm sorry. I usually write my questions down as soon as I think of them, and instead I ate my dinner, and now I didn't remember. But I'll remember it.
Any other questions? Well, I sure appreciate having the heads up, because these projects are time sensitive, but we have a time to work into it and to understand where we sit, and the timeliness of meeting with Water and Light this evening, I think, gave us some indication from a water perspective where we sit, with wastewater, having our capital fund and just making sure that we keep on top of that allows us to not have the high increases, but a gradual increase over time to take care of our needs there. And again, as we mentioned, as statutes are going to put more parameters on stormwater, that's an area that we're going to have to take a look at. Remy, it looks like you're back with your question.
I am. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mike, could you address what the trigger is that's happening right now on the temperature discussion? You said that soon we'll be needing to have these conversations about temperature. What's the regulatory mechanism or trigger, and where are we comparatively? And is that because we're out of bounds and we need to get ourselves back in bounds? Is that because we're approaching or quickly approaching? Are we marking a change? What's bringing up this conversation of temperature? Thank you.
Sure. So again, it's watershed basin driven, and so much of the land that drains directly to the Willamette has a temperature loading, total maximum daily loading allotment on it, and so most of the communities that are along the Willamette River, including Newburgh, are already having to address temperature. And so the state is, for those water bodies that have impairment, particularly related to temperature, and the temperature affects the viability of fish, the DEQ is basin by basin doing the analysis to determine what the loading will be for communities that discharge those basins. So they've not yet done that work for the Yamhill Basin. And so when they do that work for the Yamhill Basin, temperature will be one of those elements I anticipate they'll address, particularly since the Yamhill drains to the Willamette. So it's a contributor to the Willamette itself. There will be likely another list of elements that they'll review, including mercury we've talked about, E. coli, all of the elements that negatively impact the water body will have loading associated with them. And then we'll need to do a plan to determine whether or not we're in compliance with that loading, and if not, develop strategies to implement to address reducing that loading, whether it's total suspended solids related to erosion. I mean, there's just a number of elements that we'll have to address. Most of the communities in the Portland metro area have been under those sorts of rules and regulations for the past 2 or 3 decades. They have very robust erosion control programs. They do have stormwater treatment. You noticed in Shad's presentation, he mentioned water quality as an element that'll need to be addressed in McMinnville. We have very few water quality treatment facilities for stormwater. It's very common in the metro area that those are a part of every new development to assure that the discharge into the natural storm system is as clean as it can be.
Thank you. And so I'm just going to recap one element of what you said to make sure I understand it correctly. I understand what the triggers are that are moving this in this direction, but the part that I want to make sure I understand is that we don't currently have analysis done that's telling us we're on that threshold. It's just that common sense, we know that we are, and we know this work will be coming down the pipeline, and that analysis will soon be visited upon us. So we should be thinking about it already.
Correct, although I've been telling councils that for 20 years, so it's a little bit like the boy crying wolf, if you will, but it's the day is coming that we as a community will need to address those issues.
Thank you.
And Sal, do you have your hand up again?
I did, Mayor. I just wanted to provide a little additional context, which is that in my conversations with folks at the Watershed Council and the Soil and Water Conservation District, that they think that that day where this river will be included in those metrics is coming sooner rather than later. And then the other comment I did want to make is that I believe there is funding associated with it when the river gets to that designation. Is that correct? That those programs are at least partially state and federally funded?
There are a number of grant opportunities associated with some of the elements of the stormwater program. You're absolutely correct on that.
And so once we get our report, Mike, then that helps us formulate what our needs are, and it puts us in a better position to get in line for grant funding.
Correct.
Okay. Councilor Menke?
I know I've heard this discussed for quite a while now. I mean, I remember going years back. Is there going to be any kind of credit situation where if you've got really good water, you can trade it off for another city that's having trouble with their water temperature and things like that? Is that in the offing also, or is it pretty much it's going to have to be this water and that's it, at this temperature and that's it? Kind of energy credits, so to speak, but in a different way.
Well, that's a great question that I don't have a lot of in-depth knowledge about, just since we've not had to deal with it here in McMinnville. But I do know that municipalities in the Washington County metro area have worked to improve watershed areas outside of their boundaries to help meet some of their goals related to TMDLs within their drainage basins. And so there are opportunities to work with rural landowners as well as other agencies that own rural lands to do improvements within the watershed that can help you achieve some of the reductions that might be required in your stormwater permit. We don't have that mandate or permit in front of us, and so to be able to, I would say that those options are on the table, but until we know what our requirements are, it's a little hard to articulate what some of the solutions will be.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Mayor, for calling on me.
Yep. Again, any further questions? It looks like there aren't. Shad, thank you for your presentation tonight and it looks like continuing work with us to know where we're sitting. Heather and your department for working with Mike and your two groups as we move forward on that. And I will reiterate what Kelly said. I've been hearing the message from Mike for years, and we've just kind of, I don't want to characterize it as kicking the can down the road, but we have kind of done that a little bit. And so it's one that we're going to have to really step up and take a look at in the very near future. So thank you, everyone. Okay, that's going to take us this evening to advice and informational items. And so reports from counselors on their committee and board assignments. And I'll just kind of go across. And Kelly, I have you first on my screen. So if you do an update.
All right. Well, I met with YCAP's CFO today, and we are putting the YCAP budget together. We're looking forward to a budget for 2022. We're anticipating over $12 million in grants. A great deal of that will be for client services, client assistance for housing and things like that, and also for weatherization. Those are the two big ones that are going to be getting this. They're anticipating donations will drop somewhat, but we're looking at over $8 million in client assistance. Personnel costs will go up somewhat, but will still be reasonable. And we're looking at a capital outlay of $149,000, which dealt with a forklift and a truck that they're purchasing, a specialized truck for food, and one other project. So I have that. From what I understand, all of the funding has been confirmed now for the turnkey project, and it is likely to get started before the end of this year. So it's a very exciting thing. It'll be a motel somewhere in McMinnville, and it will be beneficial to McMinnville and Newburgh. And this is the Providence project. So that's what I have.
Thank you, Kelly. Let's go ahead with Zach.
Did I hear Remy trying to tag in?
Oh, no, sorry. I didn't realize I was unmuted. Nope, I'm good.
Okay.
Go ahead, Zach.
Thanks. Mine will be brief. All I've had was a Mack Pack meeting last week, and the main agenda there were two items. One was a rousing discussion via panel, and then really good long Q&A about financing options and models and what works best. I think we're still waiting on budgets from the consultants for what the Mack Pack's recommendations of a facility will be. But in that meantime, we used that last meeting to talk about financing models, how it works, kind of bring the committee up on how do other communities fund these projects? What's on the table? What isn't on the table? What's out there? And to just sort of arm the committee with that information. And then we'll hear in the coming meetings about what the potential budgets are, and we'll kind of marry the two options, and that'll be part of their recommendation is how we should seek funding for the program. In addition, we opened the discussion back up, and there was a motion made that we were carrying forward that we're going to bring back another potential location for the facility to analyze in the same matrix that we did before. So, that everything's kind of, all these loose ends are kind of coming to a head with MacPac to make an informed, solid recommendation to City Council to move forward with a joint facility for this, community center needs recreation programming and aquatic center. So it's getting pretty cool and exciting.
And Zach, did they not have an opportunity, was it last Thursday or this coming Thursday, to go to Hillsborough to take a look at their facility in Hillsborough?
Master of segues as usual. Yes, that'll be this Thursday. The staff has provided us an opportunity to go look at Hillsborough and see that facility. And it'll be an interesting example of just, yet again, how another community will do it. It'll allow MacPac as a whole to tour another facility. At the aquatic subcommittee, which I was on, all of us got to go to the Newburgh facility as well as the Corvallis facility just to see what those look like as far as different rec options, competition options, and ask questions of the staff of how those were funded, districts versus public-private partnerships. I know that Hillsborough leans a little bit more on Intel and their campus and really creative financing models with that big employer and landowner and property tax and some interesting things there. So that'll be cool to learn about and how the city got that done and what that offers to the community. So yeah, we'll get the chance to go see that on Thursday. Yep.
Okay. Thank you for that report. Chris, you're next.
So yeah, we had a meeting with the Historic Landmarks Committee and discussed in the Historic Landmarks Committee the possible destruction of both 826 Southwest Gilson and 415 and 423 Southeast College Avenue, sorry. And in that discussion kind of came out of that the possibility of looking at updating the application process for destruction and perhaps looking at the fee structure to use the fee structure to provide incentive to owners of historical landmarks to keep them up to date. So we're not running into this situation where they've run down to the place that we don't really have a choice but to replace them. We also, they appointed a chair of Wooded for a chair and vice chair. So we have John Mead was elected chair and Mark Cooley is vice chair. That's it.
Thank you, Chris. And Economic Vitality meets tomorrow, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Let's move to Remy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So tomorrow we have our DEI Advisory Committee meeting, and we're just starting to get into some of the meat of the work there. And And so it'll be a good meeting to attend, because you'll be able to hear the beginning of the initiatives that are going to be coming forward. And some of those things, just so everybody knows, some of the things we're working on is a draft of questions for city department heads, or department head engagement questions. We'll also be getting an update from the legal department on DEI initiatives and goals. And then we'll be having some discussion around community outreach and proclamations and public statements, and some other, there's a few other discussion items. And then we met, the McMinnville Affordable Housing Commission met, and we have some new work coming before us as well. Let's see. And one of the things we talked about is being really intentional with community engagement as we start to explore some of these new ideas or old ideas that we didn't put in place that we've seen be very effective in communities around us. So we're exploring, and it's explorative only at this point, but we're just exploring possibilities of how things like a construction excise tax or a community land trust could work for the city of McMinnville. And as we go through that process, not only are we going to be looking for robust community engagement, we're going to be wanting to probably bring a lot of work sessions to the council as we develop and move through that. So I just kind of want to put that out there, that these are some big things that we want to address very intentionally, and with the community and with the council. And then also we had some takeaway homework for from this meeting, which was to watch a presentation by the League of Oregon Cities on homelessness, and I would really encourage members of the council to also watch this, and we can make sure it gets sent out. The YouTube link gets sent out to everybody. But we'll be discussing that at our next Affordable Housing Committee meeting. Everybody had that as take-home work following the meeting. And then lastly, we are working to convene a meeting with the Fair Housing Council to do training for the McMinnville Affordable Housing Commission, to be doing training for the DEI advisory committee. And this is the group that did the presentation for us, I believe, in January of this year. And then we have some other housing training requirements at the city of McMinnville that Heather could speak to much far better than I could. But we're also trying to see if perhaps this Fair Housing Council training could help us meet those requirements, and so that we could all do that as a collective instead of 3 or 4 separate trainings. So perhaps add some, get some great efficiencies going on there. Thank you.
Thank you, Remy. Let's move over to Adam.
Good evening, fellow counselors and other people on the call. Airport Commission, we haven't met since our last meeting. YCOM Executive Board will meet this Thursday, where we'll finalize the budget that we heard about in our last few budget committee meetings. I had a one-on-one with Rich about fire districting stuff and standards of coverage and kind of where we're at on levy timeline. I'll let him discuss that in his report tonight. And then the last thing I had for counselors was I've seen some more activity on March Lane. It's not quite to the level that it was when we passed that ordinance a little over 2 years ago, back in May of 19. But there definitely is some activity out there, and through a phone call with Chief Scales today. I learned that our current budget that's slated for adoption does not have any funds in it for enforcing that ordinance. And so I'd like to ask staff what would be the best way to get some funds in for that, because I don't want that ordinance to just become a paper tiger and not be enforceable. And also any feedback from counselors tonight, if the mayor would allow that brief discussion with Portland spinning up their enforcement and creating a few sites, and then the House bill that Representative Noble championed for a navigation center in town. I just feel that we need that ordinance to be enforceable, or we could see a repeat of what we dealt with in 2018 and 2019. And I'd rather be proactive than reactive, thinking proactive would be more cost effective in the short term and long term. Thank you.
Thank you. And so again, any input from counselors as it relates to that initiative that Adam brought up? I know that Adam and I talked earlier today, and I'm going to put it on the agenda of the city managers meeting on Friday that Remy and I are involved in. So we'll talk about that. But I see Remy's hand up and then Kelly's hand. Remy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Adam, thank you, and thank you for raising this as a discussion topic tonight. I agree that the city's ordinance is going to need to be enforceable, and I just wanted to add another potential consideration here that's a little complicating, but as we're talking about the potential for having increased number of unhoused people on the streets, the council should be aware that our moteling project will also be running out of money this month. We have money it will restart. It has funding starting in September. That's related to what Kelly brought up in her report, that there will be money starting in September, but that leaves the months of July and August in which this program has no funding, and there are currently 60 people enrolled in that funding who will have no place to go other than to be discharged back to the street. Our contributions to date have been funded, have been refunded to the city through FEMA, and so that's a very important consideration for the city, but also we need to be very attentive to what's happening at the state level. There are other potential funding sources for that moteling program, but they're all complicated, including ARPA funds, but we won't know about those. So I think there's some really serious considerations there, and especially because we know that the moteling project, I mean, as of March 31st, and I'm not sure where we are to date on numbers because they tend to come to us quarterly, but as of March 31st, that program had succeeded in transitioning 201 people from homelessness to permanent housing, not in providing overnight shelter for 201 people. We have 201 less people that are now unhoused in the city of McMinnville permanently, that have their housing situations under control due to that program. That includes a lot of children, and additionally, that includes a lot of chronically homeless people who have been in and around systems for years. I forget if the definition of chronically homeless is after 1 year or if it's multiple years of being unhoused. So I think that that's another consideration as we go forward here and looking at this overall, our overall financial considerations that are coming before us, is not only, and Adam and I talked earlier about the changes that are coming in Portland. I think we should be aware of that. I don't know what the outcome of that will be, but I think we as a council should be paying attention to that. But we should also be really paying attention to what's happening here right now, which is we have 60 people that currently are in the process of transitioning to permanent housing. All of those people are in programming. And when that funding expires at the end of June, those people will be forced back out to living on the street. So that's my contribution to this discussion. And Adam, again, thank you for raising it. And we do have to figure out how to polish both sides of this coin, so to speak.
And as I mentioned, we'll bring, Remy and I will bring this up with our meeting with Jeff to get it on the docket and maybe staff.
I'm sorry, Mayor Hill, if I can just interject very quickly. It sounds like we're getting into some discussions about budget, and this is not the time necessarily to be talking about different or changing allocations with the budget. This council will have the opportunity to do that. So I don't want to discourage anyone from making additional comments, but make sure that you make those comments when we're talking about the adoption of the budget as well. Thanks.
So I'll ask Kelly, do you want to save your discussion for the budget discussion, or is it something outside of that?
Well, I did want to point out that there is 10,000 in the budget for homelessness, which I assume might have something to do with the Dawn to Dusk program. I don't have a great deal more to add. I'm a little bit surprised that they're cutting that off at the end of June. My interpretation was from Alexandra that it was going to go through September, but perhaps that is not the case.
And that's what my understanding was also, Kelly, was through.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be unfunded at the end of June. I think it'll go through September.
Okay.
As of Friday, that's what I learned on Friday.
I have some context for this in my report. When you're ready for my report, I'll just give it then.
Okay. Again, any further discussion we can take to the budget if it's budget related. Zach?
Oh, thank you. In light of Amanda's stay focused, maybe not focused. Remy, real quick, what was that the program called?
Turnkey.
Called the right thing?
Turnkey.
That's what she said was running out of funding?
No, it's a moteling program.
Okay, the moteling program. Thank you. I just forgot the nomenclature. Perhaps then, while we have time before now till the next meeting of council, at that point in which it's maybe more appropriate to have it, I don't know if it would be helpful or if we could make a motion or formally or something to instruct staff to bring us back models in which we could look at plugging back in. I think that 25,000 was last year's number for the enforcement of that towing program, as well as picking up the delta in monthly of this month and funding the moteling program. Maybe that would be a worthwhile thing we could do.
So Zach, I think that's appropriate to bring up in the budget discussion because we're talking about current budget. So if we can take that over, I'd appreciate that. I'm sure Amanda would also, to get it into the right form.
I just don't think that gives them enough time. Staff, if we want to do that by a staff helped and led implementation, staff could come up with ways in which that the budget could be amended if council so desires. Now start working on that instead of at the meeting where we're supposed to be proposing the budget, making amendments and changes to the budget at that meeting. I feel like it would behoove staff to have more time.
Okay.
If council is after changes to those.
Yeah, I think what we can do is Jennifer and I can touch base with Jeff. He gets back tomorrow and just see what his suggestion is. I hear what you're saying, Councilor Geary, that you'll need that information prior to adoption. So we'll touch base with Jeff and we'll email the council what we're going to do as far as the enforcement of towing and the motel program. Okay.
So you've got, you don't need a motion. You guys could just do that to bring those ahead. Cool. Thank you.
Okay, let's move to the report, to Sal's report. Sal? Well, Chris?
Yeah, I just wanted to lend my voice to and say thank you to Adam for raising this, and thank you to Council President for bringing what she brought, and lend my voice to also say I am in support of having this discussion, and if it can be facilitated to make it easier for staff. I'm with Councilor Geary as well.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Okay, let's move over to Sal's report. Sal?
Thank you, Mayor. So Council of Governments actually ended up dealing with something related to this last week, which is that Project Turnkey, which is, I believe, the name of the state program that underwrites the moteling program, ran out of money. The emergency board in 2020 allocated $65 million for the purpose of acquiring motels and hotels for shelters, and they spent $62 million of that. But they spent that money prior to completing the funding for the four projects, Deschutes County, Multnomah County, Malheur, and Yamhill counties. So last week, Council of Governments sent a letter in support of an additional $9.7 million in funding for that program, which would allow it to complete the process of purchasing those. And they did allocate the money at the Wednesday hearing. So it looks like they have sufficient funds for the purchasing or the acquisition of motels or a motel in Yamhill County. So that was the
reported that, Val.
Sorry, I didn't. Sorry.
Okay, any further reporting, Sal?
No, that's what we met on, and that was the action we took last week, was to support that funding before it came up into the hearing.
Great. Meetings that I've been to, just an update on the bypass. The allocation that Congresswoman Bonamici made for the Newburgh-Dundee bypass of $8 million was put into the Transportation Infrastructure Committee, and it went in. And I mean, they did quite a scrutiny of projects that went in or now before Representative DeFazio's committee. We went in for the full $8 million. None of the other projects that Suzanne did were brought in at the amount that she asked for. So that's a real positive. Again, Senator Wyden has put $2 million towards the bypass. Again, these need to go through scrutiny of the committees. And then my understanding is the governor's $32 million is still on the table. Again, the next 2.5 weeks are going to be critical from that perspective. We had a meeting of MWAC last week, which is the Mid-Willamette Valley Advisory Transportation Committee. They had taken the bypass off of the dollars, and Commissioner Kula and myself were able to put that back on for an amount of $5 million. And so we'll see what's happening from that perspective. But the bypass, this is all for the intersection at 219 and the bypass, about a $30 million build there. Again, I've been in numerous meetings with Project Turnkey, and as Kelly and Sal has said that we have the funding. YCAP's going to be putting out a press release, and I put some comments in today, so that's coming out this week. My understanding is that, again, from the Navigation Center, 1.5 million, and Representative Noble's ask is still on the table at 3.5. More information coming from that perspective. MURAC, we did not meet in June. Okay, so let's go to staff. Amanda, anything that you'd like to share with us?
Thank you, Mayor. The only thing that I wanted to clarify, I think that Council President might have said that the DEIAC meeting is tomorrow. It's actually on Thursday. So just clarification. Otherwise, nothing to report.
Thank you. Let's go to Heather.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So I did want to let everyone know on council that the Economic Vitality Leadership Council is meeting tomorrow at 3. The first hour of their meeting is with representatives from Business Oregon. We're bringing them to McMinnville to talk about state programs that are available for economic development. It sounds like we're going to have a party of 6 there, representing a lot of different funding programs for infrastructure and other things that we can bring to the table as a public partner for private development. So I'm excited about that, to start creating those relationships. And others are invited to join us for that meeting. Relative to the discussion you just had, I wanted to share with you, most of you know this, but share it with the public, that the city did receive $1.5 million for a navigation center. We have that in hand now. That's based on the hard work of Representative Noble's office, so we really appreciate that. The city is going to be putting together a process for how we're going to evaluate how to deploy that and serve our residents as effectively as possible with those funds. And then thirdly, we have been asked to present to the Land Conservation Development Commission a presentation on our long-range planning program. The LCD staff was impressed with how McMinnville recently went through that process and wanted us to bring that to LCDC. I'm happy that we're going to be presenting to them in that manner and not in another manner of defense of the project. So we look forward to seeing them in July for that.
Thank you, Heather, for that report. Let's turn to Jennifer.
I have nothing to report. You'll be hearing from me throughout the night on various budget issues. So thanks.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. Let's go to Susan.
Thanks, Mayor. Got a couple things for you. About a week and a half ago, senior centers and hookah bars were removed from the list of facilities that must stay closed. So we're in the process of developing a plan to reopen the senior center, and we're hiring. We have, I think, about 9 different positions on our city webpage right now that we're hiring in order to get some of these things going and open. I mentioned before, it's a challenging time to be hiring right now, and that continues to be one of the barriers for us in terms of hours and opening. The discussion about the Mack tour on Thursday, if anybody wants to go look at the facilities on their own that we're touring, it is the Brookwood Library in Hillsborough and the Hidden Creek Community Center, and we're super excited to see that. I've mentioned, I think back in April, that the after-school program that we've been working on over several years, we decided to go out for a request for proposals to solicit other providers to come in and provide after-school care out of the schools. That closes tomorrow, so we're making progress on it. I've received 1 submittal already, which is exciting. It means there's interest in that, and we'll be scoring them and hopefully entering into some discussions about another provider offering more slots for after-school care. Thanks to Mike and his staff, the Discovery Meadows splash pad is open now, which is big news for us. We had to keep that closed last year. Baseball and softball starts this Saturday out at Joe Dancer. We normally have a great big ceremony with throwing out the first pitch. We're not going to do that this year just because the format is a little different. We got about 60% of our normal registrations, which is different. Soccer was about at 100%. We're at 60% on this. And we still need employees for that, even though we're opening up on Saturday. So if you know anybody looking for a position, please have them go to our webpage. And then this Saturday, I want to thank Sunrise Rotary, TTR, and Mike Bissett's staff for doing a trail clearing on out at Airport Park. So we've had such great turnout and support from the community that's just fantastic.
Thank you, Susan, for that report. Let's move to Mike.
Nothing further this evening, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. And Claudia at the Civic Center, Rich and Matt.
Mr. Mayor and councilors, a couple of points. We've been receiving several phone calls recently about the 4th of July fireworks. The 4th of July fireworks, as far as we know, there has been no permit issued. We are not prohibiting the 4th of July fireworks, but the team that usually puts it on did not apply for the process. So there, as far as we are aware, there will be no 4th of July fireworks for the city of McMinnville. It's not being caused by restrictions of the city for any reason. It's just the applicants chose not to apply for it this year to move it forward. As far as the regular fireworks throughout the personal use fireworks that occur routinely, the fire department usually staffs up a brush rig or two in the event some small fires start off, and our law enforcement partners are always there to try and help curtail some of the illegal airborne opportunities for fire. Given the weather situations that we're currently dealing with. The other thing that I wanted to speak to was the consolidation work that's going on, the standards of cover along with our consultants and our partners. We're moving forward. Hopefully by the end of July, we'll have a product from the consultant. Amanda and her team have helped us or joined the table and are starting to help us get this some of the legal information together. So we'll have some options and opportunities. We've received some preliminary feedback from our financial consultant as part of the project, which looks to be very promising. We asked for a variety of models in the event one or two or four or six of our partners decide they would like to play or not to play. And they've done a very good job of modeling it for us so that we have some good information to move forward with. And it is our goal to try and have it prepared for council approval here to move forward in a timely manner and make it for the May election.
Thank you, Chief. Is Matt there this evening?
He is, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor, member of the council. Just a couple quick updates. I let Mr. Towery know and Susan Muir know, Director Muir know that Park Ranger program started up. We have PJ Morrissey back, and then we recently swore in Drew Stogsdill, who's a Linfield junior. He goes to Linfield University and is excited to sort of get his feet wet in the law enforcement program. And then we also, on Friday, will be swearing in another person by the name of Jimmy Dahl. He actually comes to us from Southern California area where he worked in an airport as some capacity of security for a number of years, but he's excited. He's moved up here and he has to get back on the work according to his family. He needs to start getting out of the house a little bit more. So you'll be seeing them around the parks and downtown. Secondly, real quickly, update, as I mentioned maybe a month ago, we have had interviews with a number of staff about positions for the crime response unit. You may recall this was will be a very proactive group that is just a shuffling of the deck, so to speak, with officers, not hiring any officers, but these officers will be focused on crime in the neighborhoods that we're experiencing, whether they're car prowls, burglaries, catalytic converter theft. We're hoping to be more responsive to our citizenry and then also hopefully reduce some calls for service to our staff in the patrol section. So that is something that we're looking forward to and we plan to roll out in July. And lastly, I think I would be remiss if I didn't. If you follow our Facebook page or stuff that comes out in the press, I just really wanted to let the council know, please do follow that. We put some press release out recently. We basically shoved a whole summer's worth of work in the last couple of weeks with some of the things that we've been dealing with on a local crime level, whether it's, we dealt with a mental health subject that was also under the influence down in South Baker. That was a number of days event. That was a very dynamic event. We've had a couple pretty serious assaults up on the parking structure, and I'm happy to report our detectives have made some marked progress in that case, and we hope to be wrapping that case up with an arrest very soon, as well as obviously we had the bank robbery of Chank's Bank. We were able to capture that suspect. And then lastly, this last Saturday evening, Sunday morning, attempted murder where a suspect shot a person down 2nd and Johnson. But again, yeoman's work, really heavy lifts by our detective section and our patrol section. So I wanted to publicly thank them and let you all know that they are out busy, and it has been, I hope that it is a slower summer than what we've already experienced. So thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chief. A part of our packet tonight would be the April 2021 cash and reinvestment report for your review. At this time, I'd like to take just a few minutes and like to review my role as mayor of the city council meetings and also recall our working agreement as a city council members with one another and with staff. In the city charter, section 18, the mayor functions at the city council meetings. The mayor shall be the chairman of the council and preside over deliberations. He shall have authority to preserve order, enforce the rules of the council, and determine the order of business under the rules of the council. He shall have a vote on all questions before the council in order to resolve a tie vote of the council members. Now, since early 1990s, the city council has used a working agreement to help bring a working order to our meetings. City council met in January 25th, 2019 and discussed council's groups and working agreements as well as the roles and responsibilities description. The council met again April 17th, 2019 and further discussed proposed changes to that document. Based on the discussions facilitated by Eric Jensen of Jensen Strategies, the document was reviewed and was introduced in the meeting materials at our council meeting on May 14th, 2019. They were approved and adopted by the council that evening. We continue to use these documents today to establish our working relationships with one another. Level 10 meetings have been established to facilitate a better dialogue among council through a process of IDS, identify, discussing, and solving those issues in front of the council. This year, we have had additional training in our council protocols with the review of the Roberts Rules of Order and our working agreements. Under Section 2.04.110 of the McMinnville Code, the council is to follow the Roberts Rules of Order. I mention this to indicate that I, as mayor, will expect our use and adherence to both the use of these documents in our meetings. The past couple of months we've strayed from the use of these documents, and I personally apologize for the lack of enforcement of these documents within our meetings, and I will strive to be consistent in the use of these tools moving forward. As the one charged with presiding over council meetings, it is my duty to ensure decorum in the council meetings and to enforce rules related to debate, order, and decorum within the councils. During our last Level 10 meeting, I observed dialogue that I felt was inappropriately focused on the performance of our city staff. We have a process of evaluating the performance of city staff, which is called the annual review. The council has input into the annual review of our city manager, Jeff Towery. I want to set the record straight that during his last annual review, Jeff Towery was rated at a high level of performance by the city council, and that this evaluation was put into the record. The thought that performance is not at a satisfactory level is not supported by the current council. Again, I set the record straight that the performance of our city manager is the same at this time as it was recorded in his annual review, and there is no action on the table to the contrary. If you have further concern about this topic, please reach out to me personally. Okay, let's move on to our public hearing tonight. And this is number 7, our proposed fiscal 2021-22 budget as approved by the Budget Committee. I'm going to open the public hearing and ask for our Finance Director, Jennifer, to present. Go ahead, Jennifer.
All right, good evening. So this is the first of 3 public hearings that are budget related that are happening this evening. This first one is on the FY 2021-22 city budget as approved by the Budget Committee a couple weeks back. This was noticed in the News Register on May 28th, which fulfills reporting requirements. And the plan is that there will be a presentation of the FY 2021-22 budget at your upcoming council meeting to appropriate the budget June 22nd. So the reason why we need to do this hearing specifically is because it is in statute, it's a requirement, and so we don't want to put in jeopardy any of our ability to draw down our property tax or any other funding that we get through state or any other funding sources from federal or other grant programs. So that's kind of the basics of the hearing. And I believe Claudia got one piece of public comment regarding the budget. I have not received any through the website. So that's why you haven't heard any more from me about public comment on the budget. So.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'd like to recognize that we have a couple of members of the Budget Committee on our call today. And so I will now call for public testimony on the current 2021-22 budget. Do we have any public comment?
Mayor, just want to state what Jennifer had said. We did receive an email from Tynan Pierce, which I emailed to council and will be making part of the packet for tomorrow. And then we have Mark Davis, who has signed up for public testimony.
Great. I see Mark's hand up. So go ahead, Mark. Welcome.
Okay, I think I've got all the buttons hit correctly. So that
Yep, you're good.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I have several comments related to the budget. The first one is at the budget committee hearing. I was critical of the budget message section talking about stabilizing general fund reserves. In particular, there was the last line in that section said, "This budget cycle puts us on this path of replenishing and stabilizing our reserve levels." Upon further reflection, to me, it sort of implied that we're all things were clear and things were fine going forward. But then I started thinking about paths. As many of you know, I'm a hiker, spent hundreds of days out in the woods walking on trails. And so I know a lot about paths. And I realized that they're not all straight. And sometimes they're switchbacks. Sometimes you get to the bottom and have to ford a stream. Sometimes trees fall over the path and you have to clamber over them. So reconsidering the definition of paths, I'm okay with this. I believe the city is on the right path. I'm not sure that it's going to be a smooth, easy path, but I think we're going to get there. I think we have to have faith in the staff that they're going to get us there sooner or later. My second comment is simply, what in the heck is the federal government doing? On the one hand, they are currently paying our furloughed staff not to work. On the other hand, they're giving us about $7 million, which is going into our special assessment fund. And I have to assume some of that money is going to be used to pay for the very work that the staff could have been doing while they're on furlough. I mean, I just, as a federal taxpayer, I'm a little frustrated with the way the federal government is handing out money and the way it's being used. But that's not the city's problem. And I, even as a taxpayer, I probably shouldn't even say anything because realistically, this is just borrowed money. And that concerns me too, given that 37% of the national debt is owned by foreigners. I mean, I think in the long run, this country's setting us up for some real problems, but that's not, McMinnville's problem. And another related issue is, for 40 years, the national economy has allowed wealth to be the wealth generated to be concentrated in fewer and fewer hands. Corporations have used their resources to reduce expenses, and this has had, varying effects. We've seen jobs heading offshore. We've seen benefits being cut. We've seen them putting in temp workers in place of full-time workers. We've seen automation. And, the result of this locally plays out in the fact that there's a lot of people who no longer can afford a place to live. Their income has declined to a point that they're either on the street or living in an RV because they can't afford to pay rent or buy a house. This budget, like every budget for, I believe, the past 18 years, has had a 50% reduction in the franchise fee that Cascade Steel and Air Liquide, I think John at your work session mentioned they're now calling themselves Air Gas, pay the city. And they called it in their presentation to you this evening, payment in lieu of taxes pilot, but it's in the budget, you're listed as a franchise fee. I mean, instead of looking to charge citizens, I mean, I know we're talking about operating levies or utility fees. I really think that the council should seriously consider charging the 6% payment in lieu of taxes franchise fee to everybody, whether they're a citizen living on Social Security or a large corporation that's exporting dollars from this community. Finally, I'd like the council to consider formulating a MackTown 2032 financial plan. This doesn't have directly to do with the budget, except that the city is attempting to implement MackTown 2032, and there's money in this year's budget to do that. I'm totally in support of that plan. That strategic plan has a lot of great ideas, but I just don't see where the money is going to come from to fully implement it, either in the annual budgets or in the potential use of our bonding capacity. I mean, can we really ask the taxpayers to support a new fire district, the pool, a new community center, new library, 260 acres of parks, to say nothing of the other public ideas in MackTown 2032 that probably are going to take some public resources, such as an amphitheater, an art center, a conference center, and a public market. I really think that, it's fine to have plans, but those plans need to include realistic ways that we can afford to do. We spend, you spent many hours, two evenings going over that budget line by line. I think that these big capital ideas deserve at least as much attention so that we have an idea of, is this really going to happen, or are we just, putting things out to make people feel good that we really can't afford to pay for? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark, for those comments. Very insightful as always. Any other comments for the public hearing? Seeing none, then I will close the public hearing after we've heard all of the comments. The next thing that I would do is propose the use of state revenue sharing for fiscal year 2021-2022 as approved by the Budget Committee. And I'll read the verbiage. The state revenue sharing law, ORS 2021.770, requires cities to annually pass an ordinance or resolution requesting state revenue sharing money. In order to receive state revenue sharing money in 2021-2022, a state must have levied property taxes in the preceding year and hold a public hearing before the Budget Committee to discuss all possible uses of the funds and hold a hearing before the City Council on the proposed uses of the funds in relationship to the total budget. So I have read that into the record. And so I will open a public hearing and ask Jennifer to present on the uses of our revenue sharing. Go ahead, Jennifer. You're on mute.
Thank you so much. Sorry about that. On page 10 of the packet that's on the website, the state revenue sharing as proposed is the same that was put forward during the Budget Committee meeting. So it is estimated that we will be bringing in around $456,000 of state shared revenue funding. And we propose to spread it in round numbers across the general fund. And the list is, if folks want the details, administration and finance, 20,000, engineering, 6,000, planning, 50,000, police and fire, both 115,000, and then the departments Parks and Recreation, Parks Maintenance, and Library at 50,000 each. So this is the list of how we would allocate these unrestricted dollars.
Thank you, Jennifer. And so I will call on public testimony on the proposed uses of state revenue sharing for the fiscal year 2021-2022 as approved by the Budget Committee. Do we have any public testimony?
Mayor, we did not receive any public testimony, nor has anyone signed up to provide any.
Thank you, Claudia. So I will close the public hearing on the uses of state revenue sharing. Okay, I'm going to open a public hearing for the 2021 Transit Lodging, the TLT Supplemental Budget, and I'll call on Jennifer to present.
Yes, so we will be presenting a supplemental budget for the Transit Lodging and Tax Fund, and because this changes that budget by more than 10%, a budget hearing is required. So that's what we're doing now, is the budget hearing. And the reason why it is more than 10% difference is we really have, receipts have picked up much faster than the predicted recovery from COVID-19 and the pandemic restrictions. So it's anticipated that we will likely receive $150,000 more than we had originally projected for the year to come in. So we anticipate, as we do all dollars that come in for TLT, to disperse 70% of those revenues to tourist promotion activities, which go to our partners at Visit McMinnville. And then in addition, 30% is retained by the city to fund basic services within the general fund. So that means that we will be having an increased budget in program activities of $105,000 and an increase in transfers out to the general fund appropriation by $45,000. So that's what's included in this supplemental budget.
Thank you, Jennifer. And that is found on page 13 of the enclosed documents for those that want to look at that. Okay, I will call for public testimony on the fiscal year 2021 transit lodging tax, the TLT. Do we have any public testimony?
Mayor, we did not receive any public testimony and no one has signed up to submit any.
Thank you, Claudia. So I will close the public hearing on this topic. So we have been able to accomplish all of our public hearings as it relates to budget law, and that'll allow us to bring the full budget to the council at a later date for to vote on that, correct?
Correct. The fiscal year 2021-22 will be next meeting on the 22nd, but there are in 3 resolutions, fiscal year 2021 supplemental budget actions that I will be asking you all to consider tonight.
Okay, and that will be done in the resolutions coming later.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. Well, that takes us to the resolutions this evening. And so our first resolution this evening is 2021-36, a resolution providing for and approving a form of contract by and between the city of McMinnville and the McMinnville Rural Fire Protection Department. So Chief, we'll turn it over to you to present.
Mr. Mayor and councilors, this resolution will authorize us to renew current IGA with a 3% increase for a total allocation of $410,446. Given feedback from councilors over the last couple of months, we also, in your packet, have notified formally the McMinnville Rural Fire Protection District of our intent to increase their rates next year beyond that 3% rate. And we also notified them, given the feasibility study and some of the other models for financing for providing services, we're looking at other options rather than the method we have used in the past for determining the fee structure. A couple of the other options on the table, just for your information, outside the scope of this contract, are potentially charging the same rate for the based on assessed value for the district. Another option is to charge based on population as compared to the city population against our budget allocation. Both of those would be significant increases compared to what they currently pay, to the tune of $300,000 or $350,000 a year in increases. Now, obviously, this is a contract and would need to be negotiated, but they have been made aware of some of the options and things that we'll be looking at as a city for the next year's contract.
Thank you, Chief. Let's go ahead and open for discussion among councilors. Any discussion or questions of the chief? Not seeing any, then I will ask for a motion to approve Resolution 2021-36.
So moved.
Second. It's been moved by Remy and seconded by Zach. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, signify by saying nay. Resolution 2021-36 passes unanimously 6-0. This will take us to Resolution 2021-37, a resolution providing for and approving a form of intergovernmental agreement, an IGA, between the city of McMinnville and the Amity Fire Protection District. Chief, if you'd go over that with us and present.
Mr. Mayor and councilors, this is a renewal of the annual contract. Actually, it's a move to an annual contract. We had an open-ended contract with a 90-day out clause. Originally, when we started this concept with the Amity Rural Fire Protection District, this reverts it to an annual contract similar to the Rural Fire Protection District contract. It still provides the 90-day out clause because of that was requested by the Amity Fire District. This included a 1.3% fee increase based off year-end CPI as allocated within the contract with the organizations. And our recommendation is council approve the resolution authorizing the city enter to the IGA.
Thank you, Chief. Let's open up for discussion among the councilors. Any discussion or questions of the chief? Seeing none, then I will ask for a motion to approve resolution number 2021-37.
I'd so move.
Second.
It's been moved by Zach and seconded by Adam. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, signify by saying nay. This resolution 2021-37 passes unanimously 6-0. This takes us to, and thank you, Chief. This takes us to resolution 2021-38, a resolution adopting a supplemental budget for fiscal year 2021 and making a supplemental appropriation related to the transient lodging tax, or known as TLT. Jennifer?
Yes, so if you're following along in the packet, we're at page 36. The staff report that I've prepared describes the 3 supplemental budget resolutions that are before you tonight. The first one is regarding the transient lodging tax that we had the public hearing for earlier. So we've gone over the details there. That is the resolution that the mayor just mentioned, 2021-38. So if anyone has any questions on that or
so let's open that up for discussion or any questions of Jennifer. And this is on the supplemental budget. Hearing none, then I will ask for an approval or a motion.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Kelly and seconded by Remy. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, signify by saying nay. Resolution 2021-38 passes unanimously 6-0. Up next is Resolution 2021-39, a resolution adopting a supplemental budget for the fiscal year 2021 and making supplemental appropriations related to a general fund and information services fund. Jennifer, can you present?
Sure. So this second supplemental action affects the general fund and the information services fund, and it's due to the receipt of the coronavirus relief fund grant. All of the details just simply weren't known last year at the time we were putting together the budget. So for the general fund, the issue at hand is the, I don't know if folks will recall, but McMinnville Water and Light was, their grants under the CRF came through the city of McMinnville. And so when they would put in the reimbursements to us to pass on to the CRF grant, we received the funds, and then they, in a position of a subrecipient of the grants, we would send them money. And so because Mack Water and Light is a discretely presented component unit, this category of transfer is called a special payment in accounting speak. And we had no funds budgeted in that category. So this resolution allows us, we already know what the number is, to add that into the special payments category. And that, of course, is offset by the revenue received. So there's no added cost to the city itself for doing this. Then secondarily, there were some, because of all of the costs associated in particular with the municipal court last year and everything that is taken to build the remote court operations, there was a small budget deficit in that program of just under $12,000. So this also is incorporated into the general funds component of the supplemental budget for the year we're in currently, 2020, 2021. And then finally is the component affecting information services. So because of the increased expenditures associated with acquiring all of the equipment and some of the services needed to move the city operations in many places to remote work from home, the IS fund is on track to exceed their appropriations as well. But because they are getting, again, it's the same situation, new revenue that we did not know of at the time in the coronavirus relief fund grant is paying for that. So there is an increase in appropriations of $50,000 there for that reason. And neither in these cases, none of these funds were impacted by more than 10%. So that's why there wasn't a public hearing required for that. So that is the explanation for what the items are associated with Resolution 2021-39.
Thank you, Jennifer, for presenting that. Any council questions or discussion? Hearing none, I will ask for a motion to approve Resolution 2021-39.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
It's been moved by Kelly and seconded by Remy. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed indicate by saying nay. Resolution 2021-39 passes unanimously 6-0. This takes us to Resolution 2021-40, a resolution adopting a supplemental budget for the fiscal year 2021 and making supplemental appropriations related to the telecommunications fund. Jennifer, if you could run us through that discussion.
Okay, yeah. So for our final supplemental budget on the current year, we're looking at the telecommunications fund. And so the franchise fees are coming in slightly above projection. And so because we turn that money around, we need to also be able to increase our expenditure by the same amount. So rather than risk having a budget violation next year and going over the appropriated amount, even though it's a small amount, we're going ahead and requesting a $10,000 supplemental budget to increase the appropriation on the expenditure side, which again will be covered by revenues that we are received. And again, even though the telecommunications fund is a fairly modest budget, this $10,000 does not exceed the 10% trigger for having a public hearing.
Thank you, Jennifer. Any discussion or with the council or questions for Jennifer? Hearing none, then I will ask for a motion to approve resolution 2021-40.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Sal and seconded by Kelly. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please signify by saying nay. Resolution 2021-40 passes unanimously 6-0. Okay, that takes us to our last resolution this evening, resolution number 2021-41, a resolution for the city of McMinnville ratifying the declaration of the state of emergency signed by Mayor Scott Hill on May 27th, 2021. And so Jennifer, I'll ask you just to update us on that.
Okay, so this was an unexpected turn of events. So the background is we are wanting to ask council to adopt an updated declaration of state of emergency for the city of McMinnville. And as background, you all will recall that our first state of emergency resolution was passed in March of 2020, and it has been subsequently renewed on multiple occasions, with the last time it was extended was resolution 2021-24, which would have had the state of emergency ending on May 29th. And so what transpired is that, and I believe Councilwoman Mankey mentioned it, in her report of May 25th at that council meeting, that YCAP was wanting to partner with the city again to extend funding for the moteling program. And so one of the ways that we can help support that is by our subrecipient grant relationship that they have with us, and we go to FEMA in this case to secure funding for their activities. And so one of the minimum requirements to be able to access public assistance grants under FEMA is to have a local existing declaration of emergency. So when we realized that ours was going to sunset, we talked with the mayor and looked at what all of our options were. And so the mayor did sign on the 27th an updated resolution, which I can read out to folks. It's fairly brief. It says, let me get to the page, next page. That because COVID-19 pandemic continues to have negative impacts within the state of Oregon, our current situation and conditions are that the city of McMinnville seeks to align its emergency response efforts with the presidential memorandum of January 21st, 2021, which extends assistance for Category B emergency protective measures assistance through September 30th, 2021, including but not limited to supporting non-congregate housing efforts by local partners. This state of emergency declaration provides the city manager with the latitude to coordinate an effective response by redirecting funding for emergency use as needed and suspending standard procurement procedures. The city manager of the city of McMinnville, as the emergency manager, may take any and all necessary steps authorized by law to coordinate the continued response to this emergency. The city manager is also authorized to initiate emergency request aid from Yamhill County, the state of Oregon, and the Federal Emergency Management Agency as necessary. In addition, this designation aids in the city's effort when requesting assistance and/or reimbursement for COVID-19 related response. So that is what is on the table before you as council to ratify this declaration of emergency. And that is all of the components of the resolution are on page 47 on 2021-41 is that number. So I urge you, staff urges you to consider adopting this renewed declaration of emergency so that it will allow us the minimum needed documentation or compliance pieces to be able to go forward with potential FEMA awards for activities from July through September with YCAP.
Thank you, Jennifer, for that very good discussion and explanation of what we're trying to accomplish. Do we have any questions of Jennifer or comments? Hearing none, then I will call for a motion to approve Resolution 2021-41.
So moved. So moved.
And a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Kelly and seconded by Remy. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, please signify by saying nay. Resolution 2021-41 passes unanimously 6-0. That takes us to our consideration of ordinance number 5104, considering the first reading with a possible second reading. Is there any councilor member that needs to declare a potential conflict of interest or reclusing themselves from this ordinance? Hearing none, we will consider the matter of ordinance number 5104. Does any councilor object to having the ordinance read by title only? Okay, hearing none, will the city attorney please read the ordinance into the record?
This is the first reading of ordinance number 5104, an ordinance amending Title 17 zoning of the McMinnville City Code specific to multiple chapters to update definitions for childcare and remove regulatory barriers for childcare opportunities.
Thank you, Amanda. Let's call on Planning Director Heather Richards to present. Heather?
Yes, hi, great. Good evening. I'm going to share. Claudia, can I share my screen? Thank you. Okay. So this is an ordinance to talk about childcare. We are striving to remove regulatory barriers for childcare opportunities. It is a legislative code amendment. So what that means is the city's initiating this. It's amending several chapters that are in Title 17 of our McMinnville Municipal Code. We have two objectives. One is to remove regulatory barriers for childcare opportunities. The other one is to become compliant with Oregon revised statutes and Oregon administrative rules as they relate to childcare. So tonight's action is consideration of adopting the ordinance that would then enact the proposed code amendments. These are coming to you as a recommendation from the Planning Commission. They held a work session on November 19th, 2020 to discuss these amendments. They hosted a public hearing on April 15th, 2021, and then they voted unanimously on May 20th, 2021 to recommend approval to you. Childcare, just to talk a little bit about childcare in Oregon, and this is a national issue as well as a statewide issue. What became prevalent through the pandemic is that childcare opportunities are not opportunities for everyone, and that we have limited childcare providers in terms of the need. And this graph shows the number of total slots and how they have migrated downward over the years in Oregon and are just started to come up right before the pandemic, and they've taken a significant dive since the pandemic. Things to look at here is we have 3 different types of childcare that we license in Oregon. One is a certified childcare center. That's this orange line here. Another one is registered family childcare providers. That's this yellow line. And then group certified family childcare providers. Both the registered and the group certified family childcare providers are the ones that you find in homes. And then the certified child care center slots are the larger ones. Interestingly, here in McMinnville, this is where we see a lot of our activity is in the residential providers. So relative to Oregon, there is much more need than there is availability, and especially for ages 5 and under. So this shows you what's happening in terms of the amount of children from 0 to 2 that have access to a child care slot in metro counties versus non-metro counties, 3 to 5-year-olds and 0 to 5-year-olds. So this is where we're seeing the most crisis right now in terms of child care opportunities is 5 and under. For children age 5 and under, only 3 out of 36 counties are not child care deserts in Oregon. All other counties are, meaning that there is a limited supply of child care opportunities, and so limited that a child care desert is a community with 3 or more children for 1 single child care slot. So we have 3 children who are trying to achieve 1 single child care slot. All 36 Oregon counties are child care deserts for infants and toddlers. And then all but 9 Oregon counties are child care deserts for preschool age children. And that's only because 7 of those counties have publicly funded slots. So for the preschool, there are 3 preschool age children for a single child care slot in Oregon. Here's the difference. There are 8 infants and toddlers for a single child care slot in Oregon. So in our zoning ordinance, in terms of how we regulate childcare, in the residential areas, we allow as a permitted use a childcare facility if it meets these different tests. And the test right here that I underlined was that 12 or fewer people are present at any one time at the center. So what that means is someone can apply to be a residential child care provider and not go through a land use process if it's 12 or fewer people and we count employees in that full number of 12. So that's our current regulations, and that occurs in all of our residential zones as well as our office residential zone. For conditional use in these same zones, if you have more than 12, you go through a conditional use permit process. Conditional use permit process is a land use process that has a public hearing component, and the fee for it is a little, I think it's right around $2,000. And then you also need to go through a neighborhood meeting process prior to applying for it. So for our residential child care providers, it's a fairly onerous and off-putting process to go through a conditional use process. In our commercial and industrial zones, we allow child care as a conditional use permit as well. In our commercial, our light industrial, our general industrial and heavier industrial zones. And then for off-street parking, our current requirement is 1 space per teacher or supervisor. And we do that based on who is on the employment rolls. So when we started looking at childcare and talking about what can we do better in the McMinnville relative to this discussion of childcare and started doing the research, we realized that we weren't compliant with state regulations. So childcare is regulated by both ORS and OAR, Oregon Administrative Rules, and Oregon Revised Statutes. The Oregon Administrative Rules define the 3 levels of childcare, and this is where it's important. I pointed out to you that what we do currently is 12 and less in terms of total number of people in a home is a permitted outright use in a residential zone. A registered family child care home is a facility in the provider's own home up to 10 children, including their own children. A certified family child care home is a facility in the provider's own home for up to 16 children, including their own children. So these are the licenses given out by the state. And then a child care center is a facility usually located in a commercial type building, and the number of children is dependent upon size and number of employees. So those are the 3 regulatory definitions of childcare in state law. The other state law is ORS 329A.440. And what that says is cities and counties can only apply zoning restrictions on registered or certified family child care in an area zoned for residential or commercial use if the conditions are no more restrictive than conditions imposed on other residential buildings in the same zone. So what it's saying is there can't be additional regulations for these 2 types of childcare licenses. And remember, this is for 10 children and this is for 16 children in residential zones. So our current zoning is not in compliant with that. We have a limitation of 12. And we also say it's a conditional use if it's over 12. So with that said, after going through some research and working with the Planning Commission, our proposed amendments to you tonight are to update the definitions in our zoning ordinance for registered and certified childcare homes and childcare centers. And then in all of our residential zones, so R1 through R5, because we now have R5 on our books, and office residential, that registered and certified childcare homes are allowed as outright permitted uses. So up to 16 children based on the license that the child care provider gets. So we're also recommending that child care centers be allowed as permitted uses in city-owned parks or recreation facilities, a public school, or a conforming private school in a residential zone. So if you recall, we don't have public facility zones or park zones. Most of those facilities are in our residential zones. And these are where you're going to find the larger childcare opportunities for the centers. So after school care in our school programs or in our park facilities. And so we wanted to be able to allow those as outright permitted uses as well. And right now they're not, they're conditional uses. And then childcare centers are conditional uses if they're not provided for in these above facilities. And the reason for that is they can be fairly large, and there might be impact on the surrounding residential neighborhood if the property isn't appropriately designed for that type of intense use. We feel like the schools obviously are, and the city-owned parks and recreation facilities are as well. In the employment zones where childcare centers are conditional uses, we are recommending that they all be outright permitted uses in all of our commercial zones, except for our M2 zone, which is our heavier and industrial zone. And there we are recommending that it be a conditional use. When we talked with the state, they actually said they're in some communities, they're recommending that they not even allow them in the heavy industrial areas. If we allow it as a conditional use, we can review it from a basis of compatibility with the surrounding uses around it to make sure we're not putting children into any sort of hazardous environments. And then our recommendation for the off-street parking and loading is to amend the off-street parking ordinance for child care centers only. There's no parking requirements for the registered and certified child care homes because we can't do any additional regulatory requirements for those types of facilities that we wouldn't have for our single family, for our residential homes in those areas. But what we're saying is amend that to say, amend off-street parking for on-site employees. So if you have 4 employees on your payroll, but you only have 2 on site at a time, you only need to provide 2 off-street parking spaces, and then put in a designated pickup and drop-off zone. So before, when the child care centers were in the employment zones as conditional uses, we would look at issues like parking impact and pick up and drop off as a review for the conditional use permit. And now we're saying, if you just do these two things, it should be an outright permitted use moving forward in those zones. So the Planning Commission had some questions when they were going through this that I wanted to share with you in case you had the same ones. And one was, when talking about child care homes, so the registered and certified child care providers, where you can have up to 16 kids in one of the homes, are they allowed in attached residential dwelling units? So duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, and multifamily, because now we're moving in that direction. And then can we regulate how many there are? So can all 3 units of a triplex be a certified child care facility? And then you have 16 times 3 in terms of the amount of kids, or you're in a triplex and 2 of the units have 16 kids each, so 32 kids, and another family's living in that same facility. So we worked with the state agencies about that, and the response is no, we can't regulate it. So however many apply and participate on particular properties, how many are allowed to move forward if they get the license from the state. Can developers or homeowners associations prevent the location of child care facilities in the neighborhood through the use of covenants, conditions, and restrictions, which we commonly call CC&Rs? And the response to that is yes, because in state law, unless it's expressly prohibited in the legislation saying that you can't regulate that type of industry with CC&Rs, then you can presumably do so. And then what is the number of children allowed per square foot? So the Planning Commission really wrestled with what does it mean in terms of how many kids will be in a smaller dwelling unit versus a larger dwelling unit, and child care centers themselves. And the response to that is very nuanced. This is all licensed and regulated by the state in terms of number of kids per employees, age of kids per employees, and square footage associated with it. So for where we said that the greatest need is in 5 and below, and those are kids who are probably in full day daycare. And you also need to have a smaller ratio of employees to children who are in the younger ages because they're more vulnerable. That's where we have the greatest need, but also where it's probably the toughest for childcare providers to provide the right amount of opportunities and make that work as a business plan. So in terms of notices, we noticed it in the News Register. We reached out to the Chamber of Commerce, MEDP, and other partner agencies to let them know we were doing this to see if there was anything that they had heard that they wanted to make sure we included or to provide people the opportunity to comment. And while going through the Planning Commission process, we received 2 comments, one from DLCD, who just asked us to keep the record open after the public hearing so that they could review the proposed amendments, and the State Child Care Agency could as well. And then Susan, our Park and Rec Director, commented as well, and she's the one who brought to the table, let's make child care centers in park facilities and school outright permitted uses in residential areas, which is a great addition. I've received a lot of comments today and yesterday from a variety of different people. If I was going to sum up those comments, what I saw was people sharing their own experiences struggling to find childcare, especially for the younger kids, which we know from the data that is where a lot of the struggle is. And there's concern about the current availability of childcare opportunities in McMinnville, the affordability of childcare in McMinnville, and the inclusiveness in McMinnville. So typically when a provider is providing childcare in their home, they have provisions in which they can decide who they would take and not take. And then some letters were concerned that proposed amendments would make it more difficult to open childcare opportunities. And I'm not sure if they understood what we were doing with the proposed amendments. They weren't specific of what they thought was being proposed tonight would actually make it a bigger regulatory barrier rather than a lesser regulatory barrier. The other comments that you saw tonight was that we need to prop up more childcare in McMinnville. And we're talking about this countywide and statewide as well. And there's a lot of discussion about the need for commercial daycare, commercial childcare facilities. But I would also suggest that residential childcare providers are a great way to prop up childcare too, because they don't really need, for a residential childcare provider, they're providing the childcare in their own home. But there's no upfront capital investments that need to take place that are significant. They don't go through a building code review to do that. There aren't SDCs applied to it. And then they go through the licensing at the state, and it's a permitted use. For commercial daycare facility, it is a commercial use. So it will go through a building code review to make sure that it can accommodate, that space can accommodate the assembly, and there are SDCs associated with it. And there's also tenant overhead associated with in terms of leases and things like that. So what we've seen in McMinnville in our department is a couple of people have been looking to set up a commercial daycare facility who have struggled with the overall cost to do so in terms of the upfront capital costs. And that's because you do have these three things all adding up as well as the employment costs. So our recommendation is to look at both propping up the residential childcare providers as well as the commercial ones. So that's the recommendation coming to you from the Planning Commission for the ordinance in front of you tonight.
Thank you, Heather, for that very complete description and bringing all of that to us in a very manageable form this evening. So I will open it up for any questions of Heather or discussion among the council.
I'd just like to echo the mayor's comment that I really appreciate the thoughtful approach that you've taken and the responsiveness to the public comments in terms of acknowledging the opportunities with residential childcare. So thank you, Heather, for the report.
Seeing no further discussion.
Mr. Mayor, I have my hand up.
Okay, go ahead, Zach. I see it. It blended with the paint of your room.
A couple of questions. Thanks again, both for the presentation as well as shepherding and bringing this issue back through the process and to us with a good recommendation. I hope this is, probably to echo some of the public comment, I hope this is a good start on the city's able to offer a robust solution to put our thumb on the scale and spark some development on this. But a couple of questions. What at the Planning Commission level was the discussion around home occupation provisions that sort of you have to live here, or was there any discussion? I noticed some of that language didn't get moved or changed. Was there any discussion around that? And then sort of similarly, what were the tones around the discussions on the parking requirements?
So the have to be in the provider's own home, that's state law. So there wasn't Planning Commission discussion on that. It was how do we bring this into compliance with state law? And to get the license, you need to go through the Office of Child Care and the licensing program to achieve it. So they need to show that they're in their own home providing the care for the registered and certified family child care provisions. The child care centers do not need to be in homes. Relative to parking, the discussion was more how for child care centers, really the only people who need to park there all day are the employees, and parents are picking up and dropping off. So how do we ensure that there's a pick up and drop off zone where people can park and bring their children in and then come back out to their car and continue on? And that can be a shared rotating space on site rather than a parking lot.
Okay. How good, robust is our data to have a compendium or an omnibus of available in-home facilities in the city of McMinnville? Do we have that, or is that something that the state could provide us?
I don't know. I'm assuming the state. I didn't ask that question of the state, so I'm assuming that would be public information. The state could provide it for us, but there may be reasons why they can't. The state's licensing child care providers, so.
Seems like that would be a really good bit of data that we could then turn into a helpful piece of education and for people out there to, instead of just sort of Googling your way through or asking whoever or finding which ones are, it just seems like that would be
I do know with the pandemic that many of them closed because it was just too difficult to meet the test of social distancing and still provide the care. Pay for the system that provided the care.
I would imagine so.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's the questions I have for the moment.
Thank you, Zach. Adam?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump on here and echo Sal's comments and thank Heather for the presentation and bringing this forward, and echo, many of those public comment letters and the hurdles that we face in trying to find childcare, and that if I wasn't a third generation citizen, I don't know if we would ever found childcare for an infant in this town. So, and even at that, it was $1,000 a month for 3 days a week. So definitely much needed in town and in full support of this proposal going forward.
Thank you for those comments, Adam.
I thought of another question.
Go ahead, Zach.
Before we transition to discussion, Heather, what was just sort of asking sort of themes and questions in the discussion, and this one is one that was wondering if it came up, and I don't know how to phrase it, if it's a delicate phrasing or not, but it's a bias that I have, and suffer from, and it's unfounded because they're mandated and regulated, and they're up to high standards and things like that. But what if any discussion came up around sort of any stigmas that may exist around in-home care versus big commercial place that you can go take kids to, right? Was that part of the dialogue? Was there any sort of information or discussion around that?
The Planning Commission was focused on the city regulations and not the regulations that license the facilities at the state level, right? So they were just looking at, here's the 3 different types of facilities that are licensed and reviewed and then evaluated and enforced at the state level. Here's our city regulations in terms of how we allow them or don't allow them in the different zones. And that really was the focus of their dialogue.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any further questions for Heather or discussion among counselors before we move this to a vote?
Mr. Mayor, if I may,
Sure.
open the discussion. I think you probably dovetail a little bit on Councilor Garvin's, but being the father of a 4.5-year-old son, I was very lucky to get to raise my son and in the same town as my parents, who my dad retired early so that he could help join in the effort of raising it. And without that, even at 3 days a week, sort of to the tune of $1,000 a month, Hiram goes to a great program, but it's tough. And there's parents now that know me in the community and know of a parent and are sort of on that similar track and are on everyone's waiting list and wondering if I know of any secret places, and there's just nothing, and they're knocking on everyone's door. It's really, I know the data and the information in that staff report says that, but I lived that and got lucky, and we've got Hiram in a program. And so I think all that to be said is I'd love to see this as a first step in any of the things that the city could do in myriad ways to bring this forward. And I would love this to challenge the Planning Commission and staff to work up another set of ways in which we could lower the barriers and come up with programs that would specific or general that this council could look at to continue this effort. I think that the public testimony provided was a good loud voice, and I think we should follow that direction and come back with more things we can do.
Thank you, Zach. Any other comments? Hearing none, then I'm going to ask for a motion to pass ordinance 5104 to a second reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Kelly and seconded by Sal. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed, please signify by saying nay. Ordinance number 5104 passes unanimously on its first reading. I will now ask the city attorney to read the ordinance again by title only.
This is the second reading of ordinance number 5104, and ordinance amending Title 17 zoning of the McMinnville City Code, specific to multiple chapters to update definitions for childcare and remove regulatory barriers for childcare opportunities.
Thank you, Amanda. I will ask for a motion to adopt ordinance number 5104.
So moved.
I have Adam, and then I have a second by Zach.
Second.
I will ask the city recorder to poll the council. Claudia?
Counselor Garvin?
Aye.
Counselor Geary?
Aye.
Counselor Minke?
Aye.
Counselor Chenoweth?
Aye.
Counselor Peralta?
Aye.
Council President Drapkin?
Aye.
Ordinance number 5104 is adopted by a vote of 6-0. That will now conclude the agenda for our council.
Mayor, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can I just, I wanted to follow up outside of the role of the ordinance itself on Councilor Geary's comments and let people know about a couple of movements that are underway relative to childcare opportunities and propping them up outside of our regulatory system, right? So one is Commissioner Kula is working on a proposal with ARPA funds to look at how to leverage those funds to help offset costs to get childcare opportunities underway and maybe even subsidize childcare throughout the county. So that's something, if the city's interested, we should be participating in that dialogue. And then secondly, SEDCOR has been working with the city of Newburgh on a private-public partnership project called Project Oasis to set up a childcare facility in Newburgh for workforce. And so that is also something we could bring them in to talk to McMinnville about and how they set that up. So I'm sorry, Mayor, to interrupt you.
No, that's perfect, Heather. And I know for years there has been more of a company orientation to provide workforce housing and workforce daycare in Newburgh. So I think we're behind a little bit on those areas. So it might be good to see what they've done and how they've moved forward, because it just seems to have more of a momentum from the business aspects in Newburgh from my perspective. Okay, thank you for that update. Again, this will conclude the agenda of our regular city council meeting this evening, and we will adjourn. It is 9:36. We'll stay on the line and we will open the McMinnville Urban Renewal Agency meeting, and I will call that meeting to order and ask the recorder to do a roll call. Claudia?
Counselor Garvin?